So I have both the easiest and the hardest job today. So I'm following break, right? And so you guys are all getting your carbs and getting it together. But we're also going to show a movie so that everybody can fall asleep, and then I'll come up and answer questions afterward. Seriously, I think you'll enjoy the presentation from Shari. She really wishes that she could be here, but she also doesn't, because the chance to go on a solo hike for an 1,800-mile loop is once in a lifetime, and we're really, really happy to support that and support that effort. So I've probably disenfranchised most of you because I think I'm the only person in the room with a tie. But to reestablish a little of my credibility with you, I grew up in Southern California, so I'm very familiar with wildfires, and it's just a pleasure and an honor to address a group where I do not have to talk about why we burn, and that they understand the ecological principles and everything behind it. So thank you so much. I've lived in the Commonwealth for 27 years. I used to do perimeter natural areas management down at a little garden in Southeast Pennsylvania called Longwood Gardens, for those of you who know it. And so we did several prescribed fire burns back then when I was with them. And then I took this weird detour and ran a professional membership association for about 10 years, and then landed here at the Arboretum at Penn State because of the perimeter natural areas and the integration of the woods and the ability to burn. So that, and between that and the fact that I'm an Eagles fan, which may disenfranchise most of you, I'm just happy to come and present today. So I hope you have a cup of snacks. Shari has a great presentation lined up for you, and then I will help to answer any questions that she may have generated. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shari Edelson, and I am the immediate past director of horticulture and operations for the Arboretum at Penn State. I'm going to be talking with you all today about how we plan for our prescribed fire operations here at the Arboretum. Sorry that I'm not able to be there in person with you guys today, but the Arboretum's director, Casey Sclar, is there at the conference and is going to be heading up the Q&A session in person afterwards. I also want to thank Josh and Jenny and everyone else from the council for having me as a speaker. So really today, what I'm going to be talking with all of you about is not the burn itself, but the stuff around the burn, all of the planning that goes into managing your specific challenges and helping to ensure that your operations are successful. So from an end standpoint, all of you here know why you would be pursuing prescribed fire as a landscape management tool. We all know that it really is the most effective way to support populations of fire-adapted plants and their associated fauna on an ecosystem and landscape scale. And we know that other vegetation management techniques like mowing or herbicide application just aren't the same. So that's why we're doing this from an ecosystems perspective. But there are also several additional goals that are really important to us here at the Arboretum. The first is that we have this unique opportunity to use prescribed fire as an educational and research opportunity for Penn State students and faculty. Because we're right on campus, we're very accessible, which means that faculty can use our burns or our burn site for their research, and students can participate in planning, site preparations, and then also serve as observers. This accessibility also means that we are able to provide outreach to the local community, to Arboretum constituents, for people who are curious about the natural world, and really explain to everyday folks why we're doing what we're doing, and then actually have them come out and see what the benefits are. Finally, an important goal of ours is to expose, train, and build real coalitions with the people primarily here at the university who have the power to say yes to the things that we want to do. And also consequently the power to say no to the things that we want to do. So planning well and planning in advance with those people is excellent training ground for continuing to do the types of work that we actually really want to do and need to do here at the Arboretum. So just, an example of how we're able to leverage our prescribed fire operations for other purposes. This is Dr. Margot Kay's class of undergraduate students in fire ecology who come out to do a field training lab exercise with us by hand cutting a portion of our burn line every time that we have a fire. So this is a really great hands-on way for students to be on site and to be contributing in a meaningful way to the success of our operation. So we do have some interesting challenges as a public landscape when it comes to planning and executing prescribed fire. The first of those is really just the regulatory and permissions framework. Because we at the Arboretum only burn on a 2 or sometimes even 3-year interval, we are not the state's greatest experts on the legal framework. So what this means is that we may not know all the necessary state laws by the back of our hands, and we need to go and re-educate ourselves and brush up and make sure that we're 100% compliant, and that achieving compliance is part of our early planning. Getting things wrong when it comes to state law is not a place that we ever strive to be. For those of you who routinely execute burns for different bodies here in Pennsylvania, you may be so accustomed to the regulatory framework that you just do know the law inside and out, and you're not having to re-educate yourself. It's really remarkable how much you can forget if you only do something every 2 or 3 years. I have been amazed by that myself. The other side of this is Penn State's institutional internal regulations and procedures. Penn State is a really big place with a complex administrative structure, and sometimes rules and policies change. And sometimes at a place that's really large, you, despite your best efforts, may not learn that you've done something wrong until after you've done it and someone helpfully points it out to you. So again, we like to absolutely make sure that we know all Penn State's policies well ahead of time so that we can make sure that we're aligned with them in everything that we do. Second one of our challenges is just that we're close to stuff. We're in the middle of everything here at Penn State, right on campus. So we're close to roadways. There are neighborhoods right next to our site. There are businesses and residences in those neighborhoods. We have an airport less than 5 miles away. There's a hospital less than a mile away. There are utilities and other infrastructure running through our site itself. So there's a lot of stuff that we're close to. And associated with that is the fact that there are a lot of people around. And I don't mean to say that people themselves are a challenge. What I mean to say here is that effective and helpful communication with people can be a challenge. And one of the most important things that we do, and I think more than a lot of other folks who burn do, is we spend a great deal of time on these communications, and I'll be spending a bunch of time in this presentation talking about exactly how we do that. The other aspect of people is just physical people on your physical site and managing their actual access. And, that's really a day of consideration, but it does come into play. And, I wish that I knew why that guy decided to jog with his golden retriever straight at a 12-foot high wall of flame, but I didn't get a chance to ask him because he kept jogging. So things like that, where you're on a high use site and you have to try to manage public access during your operation. those can be fun challenges. So in terms of our physical site, let's take a little bit of a closer look at exactly where we are and what's around us. So here is the Arboretum's Prairie Restoration Site. This is where we are actually executing our prescribed fire. So this is our burn unit here. It is about 12 acres in size. We've managed to execute 4 prescribed fires on the site in the 8 or 9 years that that I have been there, and that's because it's a newly established project. And I think now we've decided that we're going to go to a slightly longer between burn interval to manage the site. You can see that the burn unit is surrounded by the greater Arboretum at Penn State. It's a 370-acre parcel. Our natural lands and some lands that are being used for pasture and cropping by the university's College of Ag are there on the left. You'll see a little bit further to the right our botanic gardens. This is the most heavily publicly visited portion of the Arboretum. We get over 150,000 visitors here a year. Just south of the Arboretum are 2 suburban residential neighborhoods, College Heights and Overlook Heights, and there is also a small business district in there. So lots and lots of people around to our south. Immediately to our east is the Penn State campus. There are 40,000 students and untold thousands of faculty, staff, and other employees here, both using the campus as a workspace and actually as a living space in the case of undergrads living in the dorms. Then we have tucked in here Penn State's campus support district. So this is the part of campus where a lot of critical infrastructure is located. So facilities like the water treatment plant, the server center and data hub, the hazardous waste storage facility, and then one of our favorite neighbors at the Arboretum, folks who get a little bit nervous, understandably, when we say we're going to burn things down, the jet fuel combustion lab. So these people actually store jet fuel in bunkers underground, and they understandably really appreciate being in the know about what we're going to do well in advance. So we've talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we have, and I'm going to spend really the rest of the presentation talking about how we address those challenges and how we plan for success. So the first thing that is just of paramount importance really is to start planning early. And when I say early, this advanced planning really takes place a year out. So we start to talk with our operational partners about a year in advance of our burn. And our operational partners are primarily the Nature Conservancy and then the PA Game Commission. So Nature Conservancy helps us write our burn plan, submits our burn plan, bosses our burn, and then provides crew members and expertise and some equipment. The Game Commission provides the rest of the crew members for the burn and also provides vehicles and equipment. We really couldn't do it at all without either of these groups. They're both extremely busy. They have a lot of other things on their plate. And so it's very important to us that we respect their schedules by letting them know way in advance if we'd like to ask them to help us out on a burn. This is just calendar respect, really. The other part of respecting those operational partners is to make sure that anything that they need us to provide or write or draft or submit, that we do that as soon as possible so that we are not holding them back from any state level submissions that they need to make on our behalf. So just to kind of drive the point home a little further, this group shot that you see here of the crew from our last burn, our March 2020 burn, there's not one Arboretum employee in that shot. Every single person who made this burn happen on the crew was an employee of Nature Conservancy or PA Game Commission. So we absolutely couldn't do it without them. So second way to plan for success in meeting these challenges really has to do with communication. So I really like to communicate as early as possible and as frequently as possible with people. When I get to the point where people say, yeah, we already know what you're doing, I feel like, okay, I have achieved my goal and I have not under-informed people. This is particularly the case when it comes to internal constituents here at Penn State, of whom there are many. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about this in the next few slides. But I'm constantly making sure, or trying to make sure, that I have the right people on my notification list, that we're not unintentionally leaving anybody out who needs to know. And then here at the Arboretum, we're also maintaining a dual focus on both our internal Penn State constituents and our external stakeholders. Because really there are tailored communication strategies that we need to employ for each of those groups. The things that you tell, the university's building engineers are not necessarily the same things that you want to share on your Instagram page or put into a local press release. So it's really important to be thinking about our audience with each of our communications and making sure that we are letting them know what's most important to and relevant to them. So to that end, we've invented something that comes before notifications that I call pre-notifications. So you guys all know, your mandatory notification list, people, mostly first responders and service providers who you will inform about your plan the day before, the day of, and then upon completion. We here at Penn State also have a pre-notification round. So essentially what this looks like is 6 months out from the burn. So 6 full months before we're going to bring a drip torch onto campus, I will go essentially door knocking and invite myself over for meetings with different groups of key Penn State stakeholders. And examples of those stakeholders are here. So the largest of those is Penn State's Office of Physical Plant. So the physical plant are the folks here at Penn State who manage and maintain the entire physical structure, infrastructure of the university. So this is, grounds maintenance, this is building maintenance, this is utilities. These are HVAC technicians. These are the people who really keep the entire physicality of the campus up and running. And importantly for them, these are people who our operations at the Arboretum could potentially unintentionally disrupt. So really an example of this is the university's data center. So the data center is located immediately east of our burn unit. Given our typical prevailing winds, that's just downwind of our site. And the data center houses all of Penn State's computer servers. So it's a lot of very high value equipment running a lot of very important data. And as I'm sure a lot of you guys know, servers and computer equipment tend to run hot. And so building HVAC is extremely important. One of the main ways that the data center manages an interior temperature and airflow is through a pretty complicated air intake system. So they're actually sucking in air from the outdoors in large volumes to pre-cool and then to pass through their ventilation systems. What that means is that if we burn, there's the potential for them to suck a great deal of smoke into the buildings and run it directly past their equipment, which could be extremely disruptive on a really large scale and is something that we at the Arboretum absolutely do not want to happen. So essentially, I meet with these people 6 months in advance and talk through with them what our burn looks like. And then they talk amongst themselves about how they could prevent or mitigate risk. And essentially, what these early conversations resulted in is really a campus-wide operational plan for all of the facilities automation systems, or those temperature and climate control systems in university buildings. So that now the university actually has a protocol and automated programs that they can deploy that will shut down their external air intakes when we burn. Right. So this is something that, we initially saw as a potential risk for one building, the university's data hub. And as a result of these pre-notification conversations and meetings, we've actually created a solution that works for all of the building air intake systems on our entire part of campus. So that's a huge win for us, and really helps us to know that we're not going to be inconveniencing or worse our colleagues on campus. So these early conversations, I think, help to head off problems. They help to build trust. And they also can be really fun in terms of, just educating other folks on campus about what we do. So I've had some really fun conversations with, building engineers about, well, why are there certain seasons that you burn, and why wouldn't you just mow it down or herbicide it? And what are you trying to do out there? And why is that kind of, ecological restoration work important, right? And so these are people who I'm just trying to avoid breaking their buildings. And instead, we're having this really great conversation where I get to share with them what we're trying to do at the Arboretum. So really, that's a huge win for us. Other groups that we do these pre-notification reach outs with are university's Office of Risk Management. I think the name says it all there. And then with the university's fire marshal, another person who's an important stakeholder and who we really don't want to surprise with our burn. The goal is for them to say, oh yeah, we already know about that. So just sort of stepping back from what we do with these pre-notifications, I think the big lessons here are what they do for us. So first, they provide an early opportunity for collaborative problem solving far in advance of the operation. So this lets us solve problems before they become stressful last-minute scrambles, because I don't like having those days at work, and I'm pretty sure that nobody else at the university wants to have a last-minute day of scramble because those crazy people at the Arboretum are burning the place down, right? The pre-notifications also help us to recruit gatekeepers and shift and transform their roles. So they start out as gatekeepers, and then we're inviting them to become stakeholders, right? People who are in the know about what we're doing and who can even tell their colleagues, and who can also feel like they helped us plan for success, because really they are. Again, I'll say the big lesson I've learned here is that over-communication is diplomacy. You really can't tell people things enough times. So moving to actual notifications, we do a lot of these too. I feel like our friends from Nature Conservancy are always kind of razzing me about how long our notification list is. They've told me that they've never seen anything like it before, and I'm actually a little bit proud of that. So I don't expect you to read this whole thing here, but what I was hoping that this little snippet of my notification Excel would communicate to you guys is that this is a long list. So for our most recent burn in spring of 2020, we had 80 external entities, or we should say external to the Arboretum. So non-Arboretum staff or faculty who we were informing or notifying via e-blast about our burns. And then about 20 Arboretum internal folks. So these were staff, our direct operational partners, and then the specific faculty members at the university whose research was out on site. So compare that with the first burn that we ever did in 2013. we had 15 entities on our notification list. So much more conventional in terms of what other folks who burn in PA typically do for notifications. And really the main reason that our notification list has grown so much is because we've learned that it's a very important way to help people feel like they know what you're doing. And that helps people feel comfortable, and that helps people to actually be supportive. And that support translates into fewer nuisance calls to the university fire marshal, fewer false alarm calls to our local emergency responders. And it really helps to make sure that we are prepared when we prepare our community. So you'll see here that I actually, if you look at the headers on this Excel, that I actually do 4 notifications, not just one, and that the first one is 1 month out. So this 1 month early shot across the bow is goes out to all 100 or so of these people and essentially says, here's what we're hoping to do a month from now. I've attached the full notification spreadsheet. Can you please look it over and let me know if we're missing anybody? So really, this 1 month out notification is primarily sort of an information request so that I can add more people to the notification list. And again, this is really just because, like, generally speaking, people like some surprises, like Christmas presents are good surprises. Being surprised by a fire is typically really stressful for people. And so notifications are how we prevent that stress. You'll also see that I've got, a 24-hour notice, which is just another email that goes out saying we're going to do this tomorrow. Then I have my day of burn notices that are really, made by phone call, personally by me, to our area first responders. And then I email out a completion notice to the entire list so that they know that the operation has successfully concluded. And this also thanks them for support that they've provided, and I think helps give everybody a sense of closure. They know that there's no more fire burning out there. So it's a lot of people. Why are we telling so many people? Why are we telling so many people? So again, over communication is part of diplomacy. Also, I would add that email is free. So it does not cost me any more to cut and paste all of those people's email addresses, from that Excel into my email. Deleting is a thing that the recipients can do. And I really like to get to the point with notifications where essentially I'm not withholding information. I am offering as much information as I think you legitimately need. And then if you decide that you've had enough, you can stop reading, you can delete the email. But at least this way, everything that we're doing is available to you. You have the power to decide what you want to do with that information, or in fact, if you've had enough emails from me. Another really important mechanism of these notifications is that they get people used to the idea that the Arboretum does this routinely. So, a formal structured email that provides information in an ordered way, in addition to communicating that information, it communicates something about the information, right? That this is routine, that this is organized, that this is something that's done as a matter of course. And I think there's an interesting and important kind of psychological mechanism there, at work. It also invites active problem solving. As I've mentioned with that 1 month out notification, I'm actually asking people to tell me, who do you see who's not on here? So we're really asking people to help us out in a way that they can, which is to review the information itself, the notifications themselves. And this is important, both obviously from operational standpoint, where like, yeah, we really don't want to forget someone important, but also from this, standpoint of, requesting assistance from people whose input we really care about, and, letting them know that like, oh, every time someone gives me another person's name, I write back and say, thank you so much. I will absolutely add them. And I appreciate your taking the time to give me their contact info. The notifications also help build people's trust in us. So we want to be responsible, accountable, collaborative, trustworthy in absolutely everything that we do at the Arboretum, prescribed fire operations included. And these notifications really help to build trust in us as that type of organization. So it's important to us for the way that we manage our relationships with people. And then really public awareness is good. So in addition to these sort of informational notifications, we also do, separate, info blasts to the public. So those could take the form of a press release that goes to the local media. Those could take the form of informational or educational sessions that we host prior to or following the burn. Those could actually be social media posts, right? And we're really trying to let people know that we do this and that it is super cool and also useful, right? And why. So I've shown you our notification list. These are examples of a couple of the other ways that we try to get the word out. So on the left here, you see a promotional flyer for an educational program, a panel that we hosted before our 2017 spring burn. So you can see that we're inviting the public to come to a free panel and conversation about the role that fire plays in ecosystem health, how we at Penn State and at the Arboretum use controlled burns, and then what natural land management is all about, right? So on the right here, you can see the news release that went out in Penn State's news email, which comes out every day. It is an email communication that gets dropped in the inboxes of every single person at the university. So a great way to let the entire campus community know what we're doing, where we're doing it, and what to expect. So one thing I should say is that despite all of our efforts to provide factual and useful information to everyone who we would like to be in the know, you don't always get to control the narrative. And sometimes you will still get headlines like this in the student-run local website, Onward State. So a creative interpretation of what we were going to be doing with our fire operations. I will say that when it comes to things like this, I was really touched by the fact that like they knew what the Arboretum was. They spelled Arboretum right. They had a photo of the Arboretum, or they got one from somewhere, and it's engagement of a certain type. So we all had a laugh about this. Definitely. This was I think for our first fire, our 2013 burn. So I think everyone got a good laugh out of this. And no, we didn't actually burn down my office at the Botanic Gardens there. So kind of final tips that I have for, planning for success and managing some of the challenges that you might have here actually comes after the operation. So you notice that we skipped from like, me talking to you for a pretty long time about, communication strategies pre-burn. We've totally skipped the burn operation itself, and now we're going to all the communication afterwards. So I really feel like this post-game review is one of the best ways to get positive sense of closure for an operation that you just concluded, and also to get some early money in the bank to improve your game for next time around. So what this really means is, when I send out that final notification that says our operation has concluded successfully, I will also write in that email, after thanking people, how did we do? Is there anything that you noticed in our communications or in how you experienced the operation that you'd like to let us know about? Anything you think we could do better? And if they say, well, this one person wasn't on the list and they didn't know about it, then I will put the person on the notification list ASAP. The other thing that, and that way, I mean, you've already got that spreadsheet open. You're still thinking about your fire, 24 hours a day. You might as well make the updates before you go on to the next thing that you have on your plate for the season. The other thing that I try to do is to respect and honor people's feedback by responding to it as soon as possible. So this goes for solicited feedback as well as unsolicited input. So because we have social media, because we're in the news, because our site is publicly accessible, we will get a lot of spontaneous input and feedback from members of the public who saw the burn, maybe happened onto site while it was happening, maybe people who had never seen something like that and were concerned. And I think it's really important to, thank people for their input and to respond openly and honestly to their questions. So, for example, if we get questions about whether we are disturbing, fauna on site, by burning their habitat. I mean, that's a legitimate concern. It's actually, a topic of serious scientific inquiry and study. And so I think it's incumbent on us to give, first to say, that's an excellent point you make. And, here's some research and here's how we manage our site and the frequency of our operations to minimize negative impacts to local wildlife. So really taking people's questions and comments seriously and then responding to them and using it as an opportunity to share information and to engage them. So I really feel like that type of, in particular, unsolicited visitor feedback is one of the best ways to get a bead on what people really care about, right? Like you could spend a lot of money on an outside consultant who surveys people and asks them what they care about, but it's that unsolicited. If someone cares enough to write to you or visit the office or write, a comment on your social media, like they're volunteering this valuable information, and it can be extremely useful. So the other thing that we do to that end is really to try to share our successes and share appreciation, right? So when it comes to our press releases, our social media, the things we put on our website, we won't stop with just the pre-burn notifications. We will include site photos, we'll include videos, we'll tell people what happened, and then we'll share photos of the site months out, right? So kind of situating the burn operation within the larger project of landscape restoration. And then, the magic of landscapes really, and I think one of the things that draws people in to visit places like ours is how they change over the seasons, right? So sharing things like, a time lapse of, post-burn photo to 3 months later, right? This is something that is really impactful for people. And of course, as practitioners, we all know that this is what it's going to look like 3 months later. But for people who come out to walk their dog the day after you've burned and they're just seeing what they perceive as like a charred wasteland, being able to show them this 3 months later is really powerful to them. And then I think being able to tie in additional educational programming, right? So free guided walks, talks with researchers out on the site, days where we're looking at the different plant species on the site and teaching people about them. All that helps to situate the burn operation in terms of the overall project that we have, which is biodiversity restoration, right? And that's sort of the larger goal. is not just for people to understand and appreciate, or maybe even just tolerate the fact that we do this, right? But is for us to get to the point with people where they're like, yeah, the reason that that part of the Arboretum is so great for wildlife is because they manage it with fire, right? So getting people to the point where they understand that, and they understand that an incredibly important part of who we are and what we're doing. With that, I want to thank you so much for your time, and introduce you to the Arboretum's director, Casey Sclar, who's going to be answering questions. If you want to write to me, I would encourage you to do that. My email address is here on the screen. And I hope to hear from any of you who maybe want copies of our notification lists or anything like that. So thank you so much.